This one is called Memories of the Monterey Pop Festival, 1967. I used to listen to KRLA, the rock station in Pasadena, California, back in the 60s. Not only was there great music being played, but the DJs were incredibly clever about how they strung together the transitions between songs. My friend David knew a few of the people at KRLA and even got Phil Spector of the Firesign Theater to do a collage for his publication. The Flash of Pasadena. The Monterey Pop Festival was just mentioned several times on KRLA, and I saw a poster for it in Pasadena. The festival was actually put together by both Southern California and Northern California factions of the music scene, and the chief driver in it was John Phillips in Southern California. John Phillips was the leader of the Mamas and the Papas band, which also performed at the festival. Somewhere there's a letter containing my recollection of my trip to the Monterey Pop Festival and back. Basically, I spontaneously decided that Saturday morning that I had to go. I dropped by Allen's and urged him to go with me, but he was on a down day and demurred. So I set off by myself in Chicken Heart, the 1960 Renault Dauphine that I bought several months after Prudence, my 1955 Buick Special, had died. Chicken Heart was named after the Bill Cosby routine of the same name. You know, there was a story that Allen told me at that time about just after he had moved into his place at the Flash and had been disinfecting the place with DDT, that he slept there and kind of dreamed in the DDT fumes, and he dreamed that he saw two giant cockroaches at the foot of his bed, and one cockroach said to the other, "Shall we eat him here or take him with us?" And the other one said, "We better eat him here. If we take him with us, the big guys will get him." He relayed that dream to me. What I remember is that I picked up hitchhikers along the way, and by the time I was on Highway 1 above Morro Bay, I had a full boat in the car. It was too much for poor little Chicken Heart, and it broke down by the side of the road. I remember trying to wave down a passing car for help. It was an Aston Martin containing the Monkees, which just zipped by us without slowing down. Later, I was glad to hear that the Monkees had been booed off the stage when they finally got to the festival. Don't know why they were included on the bill in the first place. The rest of the ticket were real performers. Chicken Heart did make it to the Monterey Festival, but died there of a bad carburetor and general malaise. After all, it was French. I wound up hitchhiking back from the festival. I arrived at the festival just at sunset. I remember being a few feet away when the Hells Angels arrived in force and were directed to the special place that had been reserved for them at the festival. This handling of the motorcycle group went very well, and was in stark contrast to the disaster that was to happen 2 years later at the Altamont Rolling Stones Festival. I didn't have tickets to the event, but there were plenty happening outside of the music venue that you could hear the performances through the loudspeakers from anywhere in the vicinity. In particular, there were 2 rows of crafts booths that looked like a medieval crafts fair. It was dark now, and there were little strings of lights on each stand that helped light the way. As I walked among them, I heard the ending of a song over the loudspeakers where this guy was wailing about "Bam, bama, bama, bam, bam, bama. Bam, bama, bama, bam, bam, bam." At the end of that song, he went straight into "Shake," "Respect," "I Can't Get No Satisfaction," "Try a Little Tenderness," and "Brought the House Down." The announcer said, "Otis Redding, ladies and gentlemen." I knew he was incredibly good, but I didn't recognize the name or know that he'd actually written "Respect" and not Aretha Franklin. 2 weeks later, he would die in an airplane crash. There were food stands, leather stands, stained glass, blown glass, posters and T-shirts, tie-dyed clothing, and other stands that I don't remember. After Redding left the stage, the Jefferson Airplane came on with "Today" and "White Rabbit." These were the songs that everyone knew, and White Rabbit was #1 on the charts at the moment. Wild reception. They were on top, and they knew it. Past the double rows of craft stands and off to the side, a little further down the way, was a small aluminum shack that had no signs on it, but had a low red light coming out from inside. Naturally, I had to find out what it was and slipped inside with my sleeping bag tucked under my arm. It turned out that it was the practice shack for performers who were scheduled to appear the next day on the program. The light level was quite low, but in the crimson glow I could see this black guy playing something quietly with his eyes closed as if focusing himself to better feel every note. Yes, it was Jimi Hendrix, but no, I'd never seen a picture of him, and he was not yet the icon that he could become. All I could see was that he really seemed to be feeling his music, and that his riffs were different from any that I had ever heard, and that he was totally stoned out of his mind. The aroma of some kind of exotic weed was wafting through the air, but it was too dark to actually see anyone smoking it. I suppose I could have looked for the red glows, but it was not my actual concern at the moment, and besides, it wasn't that much different than the air near the craft stands. Later, I put my sleeping bag down next to the fence separating the paid from the unpaid, about 10 yards from the Hells Angels. I woke just after dawn and smelled the crisp, salty air of the Monterey Peninsula. The food stands did a brisk business, although I don't remember what I had. It was all about the music. Sunday featured Ravi Shankar playing the sitar for hours, followed by the Blues Project playing Flute Thing, and Buffalo Springfield playing For What It's Worth. We, the unpaid, sat behind a chain-link fence at the far end of the Monterey County Fairgrounds. We were about 15 to 20 feet behind the last rows of seats of the paid people and could hear everything that they heard and saw everything that they saw. We were about 70 yards from the stage. As day turned into night, Ravi Shankar gave way to a brief bit by the Smothers Brothers, who had performed on Friday night. They introduced the mamas and the papas, who told us that all the leaves were brown, that the sky was gray, and that they were dreaming of California. And Mama Cass got a solo with I Call Your Name, and the group joined in with backup. Then on came Big Brother and the Holding Company. I don't remember having heard them on record before hearing them in person that night, but I couldn't swear to it. What I do remember is that they were fabulous and that their lead singer was pretty awesome. They played combination of the two, Ball and Chain, Piece of My Heart, and Get It While You Can. I was more than 70 yards away, but Janice's voice wrapped all around my head. I couldn't see it at the time, but the DVD video of the event shows Mama Cass in the first row looking up and just mouthing the word, wow. Then the Who did Summertime Blues and Sure Plays a Mean Pinball and set their instruments on fire and broke up their amplifiers. When they cleared the smoke, they brought on Jimi Hendrix, who confused the crowd at first. He said that he had just concluded a tour of Great Britain and was so impressed with the country that he wanted to do a medley of the British National Anthem and the Star-Spangled Banner. While the crowd was generally reacting with, huh? He picked up his guitar and started out with Bring, wild thing, da-doo-da-doo. You make my heart sing, da-doo-da-doo. You make everything groovy. Everyone was greatly relieved. He followed that with Foxy Lady and then Purple Haze. I forget which one he did it on, but yes, he did pick one of the riffs with his teeth and do some other things with the guitar while playing it that might be interpreted in a how shall I say this, sexual nature. He ended with All Along the Watchtower, and when the instrumental got hot at the end, he poured lighter fluid on his guitar, lit it ablaze, and smashed it into his amplifier. However, since the Who had just done that in the act before him, I don't think it had the effect that it would have had if he'd been doing a solo concert. As far as who started that stuff originally, I haven't a clue. By not getting there until Saturday night, I missed Simon and Garfunkel, the Smothers Brothers, Country Joe and the Fish, Al Cooper, the Byrds, Laura Nyro, Eric Burdon and the Animals, Hugh Masekela, Scott McKenzie, and I'm not sure who else. The next day, I hitched home and remembered my first two rides. One was a short ride from Monterey to Big Sur from a woman in her late 20s driving an MGB sports car. I climbed into the tiny bucket seat with on the right with my sleeping bag on my lap, and we took off. She said that she was an executive producer of some portion of the event and pushed in a tape of a long guitar solo from Country Joe and the Fish. Her eyes were on the winding road, but mine couldn't help but cast a sideward glance at the hem of her skirt riding halfway up her thighs as she shifted gears. Her knees were like two extra gear shifts that were only to be shifted by a professional driver on a closed course. I had to exercise control to keep my drooling limited to my mind as she exhilarated in the seemingly constant upshifting and downshifting, upshifting and downshifting, going faster and slower along the neural node turns of Highway 1 that framed the most beautiful scenery that I'd ever seen. In Big Sur, I got a ride from, what the hell was his name, in a black VW Bug. Let's call him Ray. He had just been to the festival and was headed back to visit a friend in Taft, California. What I remember most about him was that he had all of the buttons of his radio tuned to the same station and was practicing being a DJ by hitting the buttons at the same time that a DJ would be hitting switcher buttons in a one-man show. He told me that there was a Pacifica station up in the Bay Area called KPFA, and he wanted to start being a DJ there. The second thing that I remember about him was that we got down near Taft. He took the VW Bug off the road for about 15 minutes and used it to chase jackrabbits around the sagebrush. This seemed a bit unusual to me, but as I was very glad for the ride and wished him a good visit with his friend in Taft, the rest of the rides back to LA don't seem as memorable. Perhaps I stray from your original question. Music-wise, I think we listened to the Doors, to music from both Northern and Southern California as well as elsewhere. The Doors were a very local product, and we were very, very big in the summer of 1967. David Ladig invested all of his $2,000 savings in creating a poster of the Doors, Canned Heat, Meatloaf, and the West Coast Pop Art Experimental Band played at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium. At the opening of the concert that night, the MC announced that the Doors would not appear because they'd caught the German measles. Universal boos and chants for their money back, and certainly no one bought David's posters. Musically, for us, it was never really a North versus South thing. We got stoned and listened to them all. Country Joe and the Fish were famous for Sweet Lorraine, but I remember buying a 45 RPM version of Section 43 at Moe's Bookstore in Berkeley that seemed to go on forever. 7 minutes. The airplane was from Northern California, and so was Big Brother and the Holding Company, the Quicksilver Messenger Service, the Steve Miller Blues Band, Captain Beefheart, the Grateful Dead, Paul Butterfield's Blues Band, Have a Beautiful Day, and many others. Outside of that, there were the Last Poets, Bob Dylan, Simon and Garfunkel, Phil Oakes, James Taylor, Aretha Franklin, and all of the sounds coming out of Detroit. Donovan, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, and all of those bands from the UK. We didn't really care where the music came from. And then there was Lenny Bruce. Compare and contrast the locals. Northern California, green with trees and architecture. That was interesting, as if intelligent people lived there. Southern California, desert paved over with asphalt, stucco houses, glass and steel buildings, and did I mention semi-desert paved over with asphalt? Many good people, to be sure, but so many others as well. Pockets of wealth, pockets of green with fountains, water, hot asphalt, and extensive freeway system. God stepped on it and splattered everything. Memory of a 2-week sunburn. When it came time in 1972 to go back to California from Atlanta, there was really no choice to be made about North or South. Berkeley and San Francisco were to me what Mecca and Medina are to a Muslim. Talk about that shining city on the hill. Whoa!